If you're over 60 and you've started to notice that simple things, like walking upstairs or carrying groceries, feel more tiring than they used to, you're not imagining it. Many people experience these small changes and often ignore them, thinking it's just a normal part of aging. But here's the part most people don't realize. Some of these changes may actually be early signs that your heart may be working a little differently than it used to, even if you feel fine most of the time. And because these changes happen slowly, they're easy to overlook. Until one day, you begin to wonder why your energy feels different, or why your body doesn't respond the way it used to. So what's really happening inside your heart after 60? The answer is more surprising and more important than most people think. As we age, the heart doesn't stop working, but it does begin to adapt in ways most people don't immediately notice. After the age of 60, your cardiovascular system goes through gradual changes. Your blood vessels may become less flexible. Your heart muscle may shift slightly in structure, and the way blood flows through your body begins to change. These changes are natural, but over time, they can still place extra strain on your heart if left unnoticed. They are part of how the body evolves over time. But here's the important detail. Just because something is natural doesn't always mean it has no impact. Over time, these small changes can begin to affect how efficiently your heart works. And because they happen slowly, they often go unnoticed in the early stages. Why, you may still feel normal, but inside your body, your heart may already be working under slightly different conditions. And when several of these changes happen together, they can quietly influence your energy, your endurance, and your overall sense of well-being. One of the most important changes that happens after 60 takes place in your blood vessels. Think of your blood vessels like soft, flexible tubes that carry blood throughout your body. When you're younger, these tubes are smooth, elastic, and highly responsive. They expand easily when your body needs more blood and contract smoothly when it doesn't. This flexibility allows your heart to work efficiently, without too much effort. But over time, this flexibility begins to change. Your blood vessels gradually become stiffer, not suddenly, but slowly, over years, even decades. It's almost like a soft rubber hose, slowly turning into something more rigid, less able to expand and adjust. And this is where things begin to shift. Because when your blood vessels lose flexibility, your heart has to push harder to move the same amount of blood. Every single beat requires just a little more effort than before. And here's the part most people don't realize. This extra effort doesn't always feel obvious. You may not feel pain. You may not notice anything unusual at first. But inside your body, your heart is quietly working harder every single day, even when you don't feel it. And over time, this increased workload can affect how you feel. You might notice that you get tired faster, or that simple activities, like walking or climbing stairs, feel slightly more demanding than they used to. And here's something even more interesting. This change doesn't just affect your heart. It affects your entire body. Because when blood flow becomes less efficient, your muscles receive less oxygen, which means they fatigue more quickly. Your brain may receive less steady blood flow, which can affect your focus or how mentally sharp you feel. And all of this happens quietly, without a clear signal. So instead of noticing one big change, You experience many small ones, and they add up over time. Have you ever felt like your energy drops faster than it used to, even when you haven't changed your routine? That may not be just aging. It may be your circulatory system adapting to these subtle internal changes. And once you understand this, you begin to see that your body isn't suddenly weaker. It's simply working under different conditions. But here's something many people don't expect. The change doesn't only happen in your blood vessels. It also happens inside your heart itself. Over time, the walls of your heart may become slightly thicker. Now, at first, this might sound like a good thing. Stronger muscle, right? But in reality, it creates a different kind of problem. Because a thicker heart muscle is often a less flexible one, and flexibility is just as important as strength. Every time your heart beats, it goes through two phases. It contracts to push blood out, and then it relaxes to fill back up again. But when the heart muscle becomes stiffer, that second phase, the relaxation, becomes less efficient. And if your heart can't fully relax, it can't fully fill. Which means each beat may pump slightly less blood than before. And here's the key insight. This doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel like something is wrong. It feels like something is just different. You may notice it when you start moving. For example, when you begin walking or doing something slightly active, your body may take longer to adjust. Your breathing may feel heavier, earlier than expected. Your heart rate may not respond as quickly as it used to. And this leads to something many people find frustrating. Your recovery becomes slower. And this is usually the moment when people begin to notice something has changed. You stop an activity, but your body takes longer to return to normal. And here's why that matters. Because your heart is no longer responding as quickly to changes in demand. When you were younger, your heart adapted almost instantly. But after 60, that response becomes more gradual. And this creates a subtle gap between what your body needs and how quickly your heart can respond. Have you ever felt like your body needs a moment to catch up with what you're doing? That slight delay, that heavier feeling, that slower recovery may be connected to this exact change. And once you understand this, you stop seeing it as weakness and start recognizing it as a shift in how your body functions. But here's where most people begin to truly notice these changes. Not in medical reports, but in everyday life. Because your heart doesn't just exist inside your chest. It affects everything you do. Every movement, every step, every bit of energy you feel throughout the day depends on how efficiently your heart delivers oxygen to your body. And when that system changes, your daily experience changes with it. You might notice it in small ways at first. Walking a little slower than before, taking breaks more often, or feeling slightly more tired after simple tasks. Maybe climbing a short flight of stairs now feels just a bit more demanding, or carrying groceries requires more effort than it used to. And here's the key point. It's not always about strength. You may still feel strong, but your endurance, your ability to sustain energy over time, begins to shift, and that's what most people feel. You start an activity feeling fine, but after a short while, your energy drops faster than expected, and recovery takes longer. You sit down, you rest, but it takes more time to feel normal again. And here's something even more interesting. This doesn't just affect your body. It can affect how you think and feel, because your brain also depends on steady blood flow. So when circulation becomes less efficient, you may notice moments of mental fatigue, slower focus, or a general sense of low energy throughout the day. And all of this happens gradually. So instead of one big change, you experience many small ones. And over time, they begin to shape your daily habits. You may start avoiding certain activities, not because you can't do them, but because they feel more tiring than they used to. And without realizing it, your world can slowly become smaller without you even realizing it. Have you ever found yourself choosing the easier option simply because it feels less demanding? That quiet shift, maybe your body adapting to these internal changes. But here's something many people completely overlook, and it may surprise you. It's not always about your heart itself. Sometimes, it's something much simpler: dehydration. As we age, our sense of thirst naturally becomes weaker, which means you may not feel thirsty, even when your body actually needs water. And because of that, many people over 60 live in a slightly dehydrated state without even realizing it. Now, here's why this matters more than you think. Your blood relies heavily on water to flow properly. So when your body doesn't have enough fluids, your blood volume begins to decrease. And when that happens, your heart has to work harder to move a smaller amount of blood through your body. It's like trying to pump water through a system that's running low. Everything becomes less efficient. And this can lead to symptoms like fatigue, lightheadedness, or a general feeling of low energy. But here's the surprising part. Many people experience these exact symptoms and immediately assume that it's just aging or that something is wrong with their heart, when in reality, it may simply be a lack of proper hydration. Something as basic as not drinking enough water can quietly affect how your heart feels and how your body performs throughout the day. And once you realize this, it changes how you see those small symptoms. Because sometimes, the cause isn't as complicated as it seems. The good news is, there are simple habits that may help support your heart without needing anything extreme. And the key here is consistency, not intensity. Let's start with something very simple: gentle movement. Activities like walking can help keep your blood vessels more flexible and support healthy circulation. It doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to be long. Even 20 to 30 minutes a day at a comfortable pace may help your body stay more active without putting too much strain on your heart. Another helpful habit is light strength activity. This could be simple movements, like lifting light weights, or even using your own body weight. Because stronger muscles help your body use oxygen more efficiently, which reduces the workload on your heart. Now here's something many people underestimate: morning sunlight. Getting natural light early in the day can help regulate your body's internal clock, and that rhythm plays a role in your heart rate, your energy levels, and even your sleep quality. And then, there's one of the simplest habits of all, but also one of the most overlooked: drinking enough water. Staying hydrated helps maintain healthy blood volume, which makes it easier for your heart to pump efficiently. And the best part is, none of these habits are complicated. You don't need a strict routine. You don't need to push yourself too hard. In fact, doing too much too quickly can sometimes do more harm than good. Small, consistent actions, done daily, may support your heart in a natural and sustainable way. It's important to understand this. Your body isn't failing, it's adapting. After 60, your heart is not weaker in the way many people think. It's simply working in a different way. And these changes are part of a natural process that happens to everyone over time. But here's the good news. Your body is incredibly responsive. Even at this stage of life, small actions, simple habits, and a little more awareness can still make a meaningful difference. You don't need to reverse everything. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to support your body in the way it needs now. And when you do that, you may begin to feel more stable, more in control, and more confident in how your body responds each day. If you're over 60, I'd like you to do something simple. Comment your age below. Don't overthink it, just type it. Just your age, nothing complicated. And if you're someone who's paying attention to your health, type the word heart in the comments. It may seem like a small action, but it helps more than you think. Because when you share, you're not just speaking for yourself, you're also helping others realize they're not alone in this journey. I read every comment, and I truly enjoy seeing your experiences. So take a second and let me know, how old are you today? If you'd like to better understand how your body naturally changes after 60 and what you can do to support it, consider subscribing. This channel is here to share simple, clear, and practical insights that may help you take better care of your health, one small step at a time. Because sometimes a little understanding today can make a meaningful difference in how you feel tomorrow.